Hello everyone, on this episode of Common Thread, SEGA games on the Nintendo Entertainment System. The year is 1986, and a company from Japan called Nintendo was willing to take a chance and released a redesigned and renamed version of their family computer system, called the Nintendo Entertainment System, to the North American market. Believing that Atari's downward spiral was caused by a flood of terrible games, Nintendo took a few steps to try and protect their reputation and customers. One of those steps was the security chip that was added to lock out unauthorized cartridges. Authorized cartridges were only made by Nintendo, and Nintendo had the last word in how many units of a game's cartridge were produced. Some game developers felt these rules were too restrictive and tried to find ways around the security chip part of the system. Atari would be one of the few to get around the lockout chip and publish some of their games under a subsidiary called Tengen. Afterburner is a jet fighter combat game both developed and published by SEGA for arcades in 1987. Your mission is to destroy enemy forces across 18 stages. Your jet has machine guns and a limited number of missiles which are replenished by another aircraft during a cutscene after playing through a few stages. The graphics of the enemies scale smoothly with little to no animation stutter, while smoke fills the screen from missiles and explosions. The fast-scrolling bottom of the screen gives a great sense of speed, but it does have a much shallower draw distance than all the other objects on the screen. Barrel rolling your jet is jaw-dropping the first few times you pull it off, and at some slow moment in the game, you may notice the radar in the top right corner of the screen. The sound effects and music are also nicely done. While fun at its core, Afterburner is a true arcade game with little variation in its playing style from start to finish. This licensed port of Afterburner for the Sega Master System was developed and published by SEGA. In this version of the game, your jet has both the machine guns and the missiles, which are now unlimited. The graphics are big, but does have a noticeably lower frame rate, and the scrolling of enemy objects are a little choppy. The bottom of the screen areas still give you a nice illusion of speed, but do have a lot of details removed. Sound effects and music are not bad in this version, it's just nothing stands out as, wow, I'd like to hear that over and over again. Controls are heavy and feel delayed, lessening the amount of time you have to respond to enemies. Half the challenge of this port is fighting your jet to move out of dangerous encounters while trying to eliminate said dangers. The quick arcade response to inputs are all lost in this port. The Master System version of Afterburner is a disappointing conversion of the arcade game, and a below-average game for Sega Master System owners. This unlicensed Tengen port of Afterburner for the Nintendo Entertainment System was published in 1989. In-game, you still shoot everything in sight. Your machine guns are still there, and your missile limit is a lot higher than the arcade version. Graphics for your jet and the enemies are smaller than the Master System version of the game, but has a smoother frame rate and better scaling of on-screen objects. While the bottom of the screen area graphics are basic, the feeling of high-speed flight is still there. The smoke from missiles and your afterburners are missing from action. Controls feel hyper-responsive and are needed as the difficulty of this version seems to have been turned up. The sound effects and music are both adequate at their jobs. This Tengen port for the NES is a better version than what the Sega Master System has to offer. Fantasy Zone is a horizontal side-scrolling shooter released in 1986 and was both developed and published by SEGA for arcades. You are the Opa Opa, a hero that is going to defend Fantasy Zone from an evil force trying to build a fortress in Fantasy Zone's space. Your main attacks are horizontal-based, and your secondary attacks are bombs. You can upgrade your speed and attacks by finding the store balloon floating around the stage, but don't get too attached to some of your new upgrades because they may be on a timer and will drain away when selected for use. The main goal of each stage is to destroy the bases that drop out more enemies. Bases that are still left to destroy show up on the bottom of the screen as a line of red circles and turn gray if that area is cleared. Once you destroy all the bases on a planet, you will encounter the boss for that stage, which you must defeat to move on to the next planet. Graphics are cartoonish, with a basic color scheme representing each planet. Bases have a life indicator that changes colors as you wear them down with attacks. As you fly around, your little wings flap and you sprout feet when near the ground. Enemies have a unique otherworldly space look to them, and bosses can take up almost half the screen. The controls are quick to the touch, and depending on the speed upgrades, can become slightly oversensitive. The sound effects and music add to the overall cutesy feel of the game. Fantasy Zone is a wolf in sheep's clothing, as the game has some challenging moments, mainly during the boss fights. A few battles have an almost bullet hell-like mechanic. A lot less than a hardcore shooter, but slightly more than casual, Fantasy Zone is fun from start to finish. This Master System port of Fantasy Zone was both developed and published by SEGA. The main goal, like the arcade, is to destroy all of the bases on a stage, then fight the boss that shows up. And, like the arcade version, you can choose to fly either left or right at any time and spend coins in the upgrade shop for better items. Some features of the arcade did not make it to the Master System port. You no longer have a display for locating remaining bases, and a countdown timer for your power-ups has replaced the bar graphic. The text naming the music track that is playing at the bottom of the screen has also been removed. Graphics for the stages still have a basic color scheme for the current planet you're on, but with a lot less colors on screen, some minor details did get lost. Boss fights now fade the backgrounds out, weapon power-ups are not as flashy when executed, also, bases no longer have a life indicator. Overall, the screen scrolling is smooth, and the animations of the enemies and your ship do not stutter or skip. The controls are still responsive to the touch, making turning on a dime easy. The sound effects are good, and while the music is close, it is missing some low-end fullness. Just like the arcade, this home version of Fantasy Zone offers a little more than a casual play experience while still having a few more challenging moments. This unlicensed Nintendo Entertainment System port of Fantasy Zone was published by Tengen in 1989. In this port, you still destroy all the bases and fight an end boss. You can still buy upgrades in the shop, and flying around is still open and free. The remaining base hint bar at the bottom of the screen has made it to this version, but the bar graphic for weapon upgrades is now a numeric timer. Graphics are very average, with less detail than the Master System version has and even less colors being displayed on the screen. Boss fights also occur on top of a flat-colored background. The sounds are in and out depending on how much you fire your weapons. Music will also lose instruments to make room for all the effects trying to play at once. Right from the start, you will notice massive amounts of slowdown in-game without even doing anything. The game was only really playable with a turbo controller. Sadly, your bullet spamming will make the game slow down even more often. Even on an almost empty screen, your reward spawns will turn your nimble ship into a flat-tire cement truck. If you own both an NES and Master System, or can only afford one version of the game for your 8-bit collection, the SEGA Master System port is the better option. Released for the arcades in 1987 by SEGA, Shinobi is an action side-scroller. You play as Joe Musashi, a ninja trying to rescue kidnapped children from terrorists. Graphics for the stages scroll smoothly with no chops or hitches. Characters and stage items are not overly detailed, but still look great compared to other arcade games of that time. Parallax scrolling and some neat use of transparent foregrounds give the game's world a more feeling of depth than a standard side-scroller. While not totally bland and lifeless, The sound effects and music are slightly muffled. With the abilities to throw shurikens, jump in and out of foregrounds, crouch walk, execute close combat attacks, and cast ninja magic, controlling Joe is an easy task. Shinobi's difficulty rises with each new stage you make it to, but never feels like it's trying to get all of your quarters with cheap shots and underhanded surprises. While other action games over the years have come and gone, very few have had the lasting influence of Shinobi. Released for the 8-bit Master System by SEGA for North America in 1988, this Shinobi is an almost direct translation of the side-scrolling action arcade game. As the hero named Joe Musashi, you try to rescue the kidnapped children of world leaders and defeat the terrorist group of ninjas responsible for the kidnappings, called the Ring of Five. Graphically, the game is pretty average looking. Backgrounds are missing both the parallax scrolling and transparent railing effects, completely losing the world of depth illusion. Characters are somewhat still detailed aside from their stiff movements and gestures. The coloring of sprites and objects are also just a step above good enough. The sound effects and music are standard, with enough variety to not become too annoying. Most of the arcade moves have made it to this port, with some being earned by rescuing children instead of you already having them at the start. A little slower paced than the arcade version, the Master System version still controls fine. Major differences in some gameplay elements may make or break the game for some players of the arcade version. First, one-hit deaths are now gone, and a life meter has been added to the top of the screen. You can get extra lives as you play, just don't expect any continues when you run out. Second, jumping from one foreground to the other, on some areas, will pan the screen up, hiding the lower levels and some enemies. Also, you no longer have to rescue all of the children on a stage to continue to the next area, but in order to get the bonus stages or earn new attacks and magic, you still have to rescue more children on the same stage anyway. The Master System version of Shinobi's difficulty is challenging, with only 1 or 2 moments where power-ups and maximum life are almost a necessity. While fun, Shinobi for the Master System is just an above-average arcade port. This unlicensed Nintendo Entertainment System port of Shinobi was first published by Tengen in 1989. The story is still the same. You are Joe Musashi, a ninja rescuing kidnapped children across different areas of the world from the Ring of Five. The game is average looking graphically. Just like the Master System port, backgrounds are missing both the parallax scrolling and transparent railing effects. Characters are somewhat smaller, less detailed, and the coloring of sprites and objects are flat and bland. Sound effects and music are average, with some playback dropouts. Like the Master System port, one-hit deaths are now gone, and a life meter has been added to the top of the screen. Earning power-ups and extra lives is done by rescuing more and more children per stage. One advantage the Tengen port really has over the SEGA port is that jumping from one foreground to the other is all on one screen, just like the arcade version. The controls, gameplay, and difficulty are also on par with the Master System version. Having more in common with the SEGA Master System version than the arcade version, this port is not quite as good as SEGA's official offering. If you like this video, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing to this channel. Every click helps. And, as we race into the future together, we would like to thank you for watching and see you next time. Graphics for the stages still have a basic color scheme for the current planet you're on. Did I say screen?